Hey, so today we're checking out Shinzbass from Submission Audio. I've known Nick since 2009. The second ever European tour Solosis did was supporting Black Dahlia Murder, then Cephalic Carnage, in which Nick plays bass, then Psychroptic and Solosis opening. It was a really great tour, all amazing bands. And Nick is one of the funniest guys I've toured with. Really, really nice guy, but most importantly, one of the most insane bass players out there. And it's somewhat of a rarity to find bass players that are more traditional in, playing fingerstyle in extreme music. Obviously, you've got people like Alex Webster and bands like Obscura using like fretless bass and stuff like that. But yeah, Nick is up there with some of the best bass players out there in extreme music or heavy music. He obviously also plays bass in Havoc as well as Job for a Cowboy. And on the most recent Job for a Cowboy records, you can really hear his playing. And the cool thing about this plugin is that it captures every articulation that you'd need to mimic that kind of playing. So yeah, very cool plugin. Really stoked for Nick that this has happened as well. And before we get into it, I originally uploaded this video just as like a short demo, but then I actually had Nick, I sent him the bass MIDI, and he changed it to kind of adapt it to how he would actually play it. So he's changed some of the bass lines, embellished things, and added some of the different articulations that he would use in certain places, which is really cool. So shout out to Nick. So I've got the plugin loaded up here in Contact. So you've got, if you click on this, you'll clean DI sound. Then I think this is just a little bit hotter, and then you've got a bit more of a distorted tone there. And there's an inbuilt mixer. I haven't touched that for this. Just going with the DI sound. So it's a Warwick Dolphin bass. I've got the humanize function turned up a bit, and the position dial here. Just so we're staying away from the really clanky, I guess, lower frets on the higher strings. So it forces the higher notes to be played a little bit further up in the neck, which gives it a little bit more of a warm sound. That's how it sounds. Got a really nice clank to it. You can tell that he's digging in quite aggressively. And here's how it sounds within the mix. And let's just mute. And let's just solo a bit of that so you can kind of hear these articulations. Cool, so I'm going to strip it back to the very start of the chain and I'll show you what I've got going on. So first, I have this CLA compressor, just compressing it a bit. Relatively fast attack, that's the fastest release. If you're familiar with these compressors, the fast side is that side, and when it's usually the left. So I guess that's relatively heavy-handed compression there, like around -5 to -7 at the most of gain reduction. Just kind of taming some of that aggressive attack. Up next, we've got the Dark Glass Ultra. I really like this plugin because you can blend in the completely dry, unprocessed tone, which works pretty cool, especially when you're going for, this kind of fingerstyle, slightly cleaner bass sound. So I usually start by having the blend up full and just kind of listening. So yeah, not too overly distorted or saturated. I like hearing more of the 750 mid-range to kind of cut through my guitars and my mixes. So I'm boosting 750 there. That really kind of cuts through the guitars. The peak of my guitars in terms of the frequencies that are the loudest are usually somewhere between 3 to 5k for the high end, and then 150 or something for the low end, like especially on palm mutes. So even though there is a bunch of 750 in my guitar tone, it's not the loudest part, and I would say I have a good amount of mid-range in this area coming through on the bass that is almost as loud as the high end coming from the bass or the high mid, so it kind of fits in nicely against the guitars having this 750. Boosting some treble and some low end. I've got the low mids just carving out a tiny amount of 250, but I actually had the blend control, as you saw, about halfway, so we're getting more of that clean sound come through. Just having more saturation and distortion kind of helps with, you know, more clean tones, kind of even them out a bit, but yeah, I found a happy medium pretty much halfway. Cool, so up next, got some EQ, and using the Pro Q3. Cool, so first thing I guess I usually find there can be, it depends on the bass, depends on the, you know, I guess amp sim or plugin you're using, but this can be a problematic, really pokey frequency. So I just wanted to tame that a little bit, adding a little bit more high end in. Even though it looks like on the Dark Glass plugin, it looked like I was cranking the high end, it's still not a huge amount coming through. So boosting a bit there. Got a low pass, not doing a great deal. And this is something that is pretty common for me. I'm usually taking out between, I don't know, it really depends on the time, but this kind of area, like 130, can build up in your mixes and really sound like a sine wave of just like annoying low end. So I'd rather have a more like rounded out low end. So I actually carve around 150 or 130 out. And I'm just doing like a broad low shelf on the low end there, just to bring up a bit of what I've taken out just in general. So it's like I said, it's going to be filling out the low end a bit more by carving this area out. So roughly same with guitars, but in different areas. My low end and my high end roughly peak around the same level when I'm mixing bass. And my high end's usually, I guess, peaking somewhere around 3K, and the low end, I guess, around like 60 to 80. And this high pass filter is just there just as a precautionary thing, you know, just in case anything kind of gets a bit too much down in that area, but there's not a lot going on below 40 Hertz anyway. Cool, so up next I use the L1 limiter just to kind of even things out a bit. I tend not to go too aggressive with this because you do start to like kind of kill your low end and just bring up the mids a bit if you like overly limit bass. So as you can see, I'm kind of just doing, on average, like -3 dB of gain reduction. It'll go up a little bit higher, but that's not consistently going to be going to like -6 or anything. It'll just be like the odd note that might jump through just a little bit too loudly. Cool, and then on the back end of the limiter, I usually EQ again, and this is just like my final EQ post limiter, post any processing, just to kind of just see how it fits in the mix and do my last adjustments post limiter. So this little area here, I've done quite a relatively narrow cue, and it's in dynamic mode, so that just every now and then there was just something in this area that was kind of sticking out a bit in the mix. That's that kind of fresh strings clanking on the fretboard kind of area that can get a little bit much. It's not a great deal that being brought out there, but just a little bit. I guess I felt this area was just a little bit too kind of whistly in the mix. Again, nothing too aggressive. Taking out a bit of like 317. It's not super noticeable, to be honest. It's just kind of a little bit murky in that area, and that's where like the kind of the note area of the guitars kind of lives around here, between 300 to like 450 in the guitars. So kind of clearing it up on the bass. Tackling this area again with dynamic EQ, which is kind of like a multi-band compressor in a way. Boosting a little bit of 60 hertz in, just to get a bit more of that low end back that maybe the limiter might have killed a bit. Again, I don't know why I've done another high pass filter, but I guess it's just like I say, a safety net. And with this mix in particular, I don't need like a ton of sub low end coming from the bass, especially with this kind of more percussive and dynamic fingerstyle bass tone. It's less like, sometimes in modern metal these days, people are mixing bass to sound more like a synth, using plugins like Parallax, which are really great for getting a bit more of a really saturated tone that really can make the bass fill out the more low end and high end more like a synth, and like a saw kind of synth where it's just kind of more saturated, and maybe you could get a bit more sub, but with a more natural or clean, bass tone. I tend not to go too aggressive on the sub lows because there's just a bit more nuance to this type of playing. So that's pretty much how I've processed it. I wouldn't say it's too overly processed. We got 5 different plugins going, but I wouldn't say anything's too excessive there. So let's check out some of these articulations in solo. Cool, so there it is. Great plugin. Great for any kind of music, really, if you're doing like, jazz, fusion, or technical death metal. If you're just using the DI sound in particular, you can kind of just sculpt that into whatever kind of music or genre or mix you're working on. So definitely a very cool library to have in your arsenal for programming bass.